All right, Brett C Banfe back on with us today. This is Gavin Mehl. We're going to do a show and talk, go into more of the latest stuff, what he's doing with TCG, and also the latest on the Satoshi coins. Potentially, it looks like the Satoshi coins are moving, and just some updates in the community. Brett, how you been? Good to see you.
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me back on.
Doing awesome, man. Glad to have you. I want to ask you. So, in the news, all over the crypto verse is the 80,000 BTC and BCH that have moved, and I'm a little confused on this now. It's like I'm kind of reading multiple things, and I need your perspective. So the story is apparently 80,000 BTC and BCH moved or is going to be moved. That's why I'm not confused. And they put a legal notice in there on the blockchain, and then they put in a nomogram, which is potentially a mainstream TV show called Lost. So what happened? And I do know that the BSV wasn't touched. So what do you know about it? And if you can give us some perspective on your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So this came to my attention from Kurt Wicker Jr. and also a gentleman by the name of Palsky. Those familiar with the space may be aware of Palsky. I think it's Paalsky. We can put those links in the description. And Palsky had shared a piece of content on X a couple days ago, and it was written by a French guy. But luckily, X has the ability to translate the content for me. So it was really interesting as, I'm reading in what's going on with the coins moving, and apparently the ordinals that were sent to the coins just prior to moving, with the numbers are 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42. So there's six numbers in total that were sent. Famously, they all add up to the number 108, which is a sacred number in sacred geometry. So something that I've been getting a lot more into recently. 108 degrees is the degrees in the pentagon and the angle of the pentagon, and the pentagon is the face of the dodecahedron, which was, these are called platonic solids because Plato absolutely loved these solids, but they're solids whose angles are all identical and whose faces are all identical. So we can think of one as a cube. Everyone knows that one. All the angles are 90 degrees, all the faces are perfect squares. But there's a few other ones, including the tetrahedron, the icosahedron, which is a 20-sided. Uh, People know these from Dungeons and Dragons, right? This is when you go and buy your dice at Dungeons and Dragons. You're getting the D20, the D4, the D8. That's the octahedron essentially. So these numbers have some sort of mystical significance, I think. They also have the anecdotal significance of being, key parts of the storyline of Lost, which I wasn't that familiar with the show up until now, but I have been looking in and doing a little research around that. I think that one of the episodes that's relevant, you can go on IMDb. I believe it's in season 2, which would have put it maybe around 2005 or so. But it was, I believe, a episode called Obedience, and so in that episode, the people within the storyline, they have to input the codes in that order every 108 minutes. So another reference back to that sacred number. And they have to do that every 108 minutes, or else the world basically is going to kind of become unmoored and will lose the fabric of reality. So there's some real interesting sort of mystical significance to these numbers. There's cultural significance to them. Also, what was released by Kurt on that in that X article that I was talking about, the X post, is that the writer of that article, where they had to put these numbers in a certain sequence every 108 minutes, that writer's name was Craig Wright, which of course has, significance to our space, certainly. And so, yeah, so what exactly is, the full scope and the picture of this? I don't think we really know. And it seems on the surface and on the outside that that these first of all, they're not random, but what exactly their meaning is, I don't think anyone could say at this moment. But it is really exciting and interesting to think about and to explore. And I have to admit, over the past 3-4 days, they moved on the 4th. So we're recording this on July 9th. So that was 5 days ago, and I have been, really deep into the weeds on some of this stuff, reading French posts from guys that I've never heard of, and trying to find the clues that piece all of this thing together.
All right, so the sounds like the number side of it was the things from Lost, and also the it added a 108, which is a sacred number. Now, uh, and then Craig Wright was a screenwriter for that TV show. Not
Right.
not Dr. Craig Wright, but another guy.
That's
And
right.
the all right, so there, I guess where I'm confused is from reading that same French Post article, it mentioned, I think it was that article, maybe it was another one, but it mentioned that there was legal notices, and in the legal notices I read, they seemed to reference some spoof website, Solomon Brothers. I couldn't find the attorney's name on that at all. Anytime you have a law firm, there's always an attorney behind it, and so I couldn't find that. So I was a little confused by that. Maybe it's not a law firm, but then there's got to be some sort of a licensing involved in it somewhere where somebody's licensed. And I couldn't find that. So what exactly does this legal notice, have to do with things? And the legal notice appeared to say something along the lines of what's called constructive possession. They were going to take constructive possession. But did they actually move the coins? And if they did move the coins, doesn't that require the keys to do that? I mean,
Yeah, that seems to be a little bit about what that French post was referencing, and we can again link to that post. But yeah, the post is talking about how potentially this could have been now, let's put our tinfoil hats on here. When I'm not saying that this is the case, I'm just saying this is the argument that was being made on the article that I was reading, which is that potentially there could be you know, some sort of ability to exploit, for example, if a random number generator was being used to create private keys for some of these old coins, then maybe if the random number generator wasn't sufficiently random enough, then maybe there could have been a way to trace that back. What they were saying was that if you could first of all, I don't believe any of this stuff, so I just want to be clear about that. I don't think that this is the case. However, I am just sort of trying to relay with the information that was being speculated on by this individual, that if some sort of compromise of a particular pay to public key hash had been discovered, not necessarily because it's an issue with the encryption itself or the tools that were used to create that encryption, but maybe it was an issue with the generator, the that was being used to generate the key. Then potentially, if you could find that, then you could effectively kind of work backwards, and maybe so that's the speculation, is that maybe the individual who possesses these or who move these coins, maybe they aren't the rightful owner, but what they are trying to do is to, move them, and so they have the key, but they derived the key. They didn't, access the key as the original owner of those coins. That is what was being speculated. Again, I don't necessarily buy into that or agree with that, but it is one of those things where when you don't have all the information about something, your brain, we have brains that immediately start inventing wild scenarios that could be outcomes or explanations. And, in a way, it's kind of fun to imagine all of this stuff. Uh, it also brings really interesting issues to light. One other thing that I'll touch on, especially since you brought up Craig, is that there was also a post recently. So Craig's been in the news recently because some of these wallets that were moved. Those were wallets that were submitted through the climbing court case and were declared as being owned by Craig. Now the opponents of Craig might say, well, he just claimed that he owned those, but he never it was never ever determined that he truly was. That was
It
just on a
was though.
uh,
I would disagree.
yes, and I agree too. However, there was an instance where some addresses supposedly have been included because when the full scope of the addresses that were in control were submitted, I think even Craig was upfront in saying, that this is an estimated list and that there isn't a full list, and it partly has to do with um some of his knowledge about Bitcoin that is so galaxy brained that he doesn't necessarily need to keep public keys or all of this stuff for all of his assets because he has other methods of accessing the Bitcoins without necessarily using the what we would think of as a traditional method of knowing what your public key is and storing that and then having an associated derived private key. Now, for example, imagine that you could link all of these public keys into a single heuristically determined master key or master address or something like that, and then basically you could have subsequent private keys that derive from that master address. So the reason what that would seem to suggest is that as long as you have the master key or the master public key that from which these other ones are that these other ones are hierarchically determined from, then maybe you wouldn't need every single corresponding public key. I'm not really sure because it gets a little bit outside of my depth in terms of my understanding, but I do know that he is, absolutely brilliant when it comes to this stuff, and that if he doesn't feel like he needs to have a full catalog or list of every single public key that he ever mined, then when he's being asked by the court to produce that, what he would have been doing is going back and saying, okay, and this is something that other people within the community have contributed to. They've gone through and they've looked at sort of patterns of and I don't even know what these patterns are, but you can use a pattern to identify what are most likely Satoshi coins. But even then, they are still just most likely Satoshi coins because of the way that Bitcoin works with the firewalling of the identity from the key itself. You never actually know. To this day, I mean, we have a good speculation about that he maybe owns. Satoshi owns the first keys or the first Bitcoins from 1 to 20 or 1 to 25, but we even though we have an idea and a guess, we don't know for sure. So yeah, that's sort of a long way to just say that there could be potential. So these addresses were submitted in the courts. They were verified, but there's always people that are going to stand on the outside and try to say, well, just because they were included, like I never personally saw it, or saw it,
Yeah.
this, so that they're going to find some way to poke a hole in it.
Yeah,
But
but
either way,
that
it is relevant that two of those addresses were on that docket
I
list.
saw the RFA 5, and that was, I think it's a 20, I don't know if it's a 2021 or 20, I'm not sure what year it was, but request for admissions 5, where Dr. Wright or Craig had submitted in, Craig Wright had submitted in addresses. One of those addresses was linking into one of those wallet addresses. That's what I saw. That was submitted into evidence as a matter of law. That's no longer in dispute. That address belonged to Craig. That's over. Nobody can go out and dispute that. I don't care what they say online. It's called res judicata. It's over. They had their chance at that time if they wanted to file a cross complaint or intervene. There's a period of time you can do that. Like you could have intervened, objected. No, that's not, that there is a period for that, but that's gone. So,
Yeah.
the law does not allow things to go on forever. After a while, it's cured. And that was already said. Plus, it was already determined that he had the rights to those, by
Yeah,
a
and
jury.
then
So,
there's also the simplest explanation is most often the correct one, right? And so the simplest explanation is just that those actually are his addresses, right? And I think he has been upfront and said, So again, so a lot of this stuff, we when news like this comes out, you end up going through some old message archives and reading, and refreshing a lot of this story because it is a a dense and complex story. But there are old messages that, for example, talked about, that were known messages that came from Craig that said something to the effect of, Dave was smarter about his managing of coins than I was. For example, he was keeping many of his coins segregated into these smaller accounts that each had 50 Bitcoins in them, whereas I was converting mine into these larger addresses that each contained 10,000. So that's messages that we are verifiable
Oh,
that demonstrate that
that's part of history that he said that he did have wallets of 10,000.
yes, and he's sort of critiquing himself about that. He's saying,
Yeah, it was a,
that Dave was a little bit
he would do
wise
it
when it
differently
came.
now if he had the chance to do
Yeah,
it.
he would maybe do it differently now. That's
All
right.
right. So,
And I
uh,
think maybe it just made it easier for him to manage or whatever. Who knows what the reason why was? But at the very least, you're seeing two sides of the story that add up, and
let me
that's
ask you about the legal notice because there's something that doesn't this doesn't make sense on this. So maybe the theory is then that the coins, the master key is maybe lost, and then let's just forget the identity of the owner at this point. The owner of the person who did that notice is trying to claim those coins, like on a constructive possession. On it says abandoned keys, abandoned coins. It
yeah.
said what is your theory on that? I'm confused. And how could have been abandoned if this person has the keys and they're moving them? Could that have been that they? What is your theory on that?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess kind of works a little bit similar to, like leaving leaving a car on the side of the highway or something like that, right? Like, you can probably, at least in my state, you can leave a car on the side of the highway for 3 days, and you don't have to be near it, you don't have to be around it. But eventually, after 3 days, like people are going to come around and put a big orange sticker on it that says like, this appears to be abandoned, does this belong to anyone? You now have a week to move it. So yeah, once that sticker goes on there, you have 7 days, and it's just sort of a little bit about how the law works. You're much more of an expert on this than me, but I think it's a benefit to Western society is that, we have the ability to make declarative statements and then be held and hold ourselves to those declarative statements. So, obviously, you can't just like walk up to someone's home and stick a big orange sticker on their front door and say like, I didn't see anyone coming into this house in the past 7 days. If you don't flicker your lights, then I'm gonna just move in, right? It doesn't necessarily work like that, but there is something to be said for a formal notice that is given with sufficient ability, so this is the thing when you make a judgment with someone where you go and you sort of, there's those movies with Seth Rogen where he's like pretending to be, a pizza guy, and he says like, hey, are you John Doe? And the guy says yes, and he says like, well, here, you're served now, right? So like you have to make sure that the person is named, that they're aware that
Yeah,
you're making a service or
yeah.
whatever.
Actual notice for sure is
Exactly. But
absolutely critical.
if they get the notice and they don't respond to it, and you're giving them a formal declaration that
Well, the law will then act, and the law will take action, and maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe that's really what's happening is that those coins were actually abandoned, and they've just been there for that long, and somehow. But I guess what I'm confused is how the heck would somebody get the keys to abandoned coins? I guess AI, or you're saying a random generator, maybe, or maybe they knew that person and that person died.
yeah. So again, let's put our tinfoil hat on or something like that, right? And we are going to speculate without much shred of evidence, right? But one of the things that could potentially have been the case is, if those funds were tied to a centralized exchange that went down, like for example, Mount Gox or something like that, right? So the key might be known because the funds are being managed. It'd just be like the same as if you put a gold bar into a vault in a bank or something like that, and then the bank manager has a key to that vault, right? That gold still belongs to you, but the bank manager has the access to that. So the theory could be that the keys were not lost because the keys were always controlled by whatever centralized entity was managing those funds. But what was lost was the ownership claim to those funds. So those could be the result of, like a deceased individual that had no living, relatives, no heirs, nothing. So, what happens to those funds in that case? Maybe those funds can be, turned over, or those funds could be considered abandoned. And then, there's a whole legal process that already exists with all this stuff when we're talking about
Yeah.
real property, and so all it is just, it's just piercing the veil, I think, between that, oh, just because it's a distributed ledger and it's a decentralized protocol, and it's a non tangible asset, meaning that it's like a cryptographic asset that is secured cryptographically, that potentially these things that apply to real property, those don't apply in this case. And maybe this is trying to argue the opposite. Maybe it's saying that formal declarations and service with notice, these are things that have applied for thousands of years, and they've been pillars of the Western liberal tradition, and that they continue to be pillars of the Western liberal tradition, even if those funds are basically managed on a distributed ledger.
Yeah, and that's I need to learn is where I'm missing my knowledge is how this would work, because in a legal sense, if you the way I would see it working is that I actually had a client, a friend of mine, or not a client, just a friend of mine, when I said, hey, I lost my crypto, I lost my Bitcoin. Okay, well, here's what he considered doing. He's like, well, if you file an action, get a court order, get the court to declare that you're the legal owner. The court decided, yep, you have the KYC on that stuff. That was you. Nobody objected. Now you got a judgment on that. Now you would bring that over to the miners or to the Bitcoin association under the NAR or the DAR, if it was BSV, right? And then they would activate on it. That's the only way I would see it working. But apparently there's another way that's what's potentially happening now.
Yeah, and this goes into the concept of centralized versus decentralized, and when we consider the concepts of a decentralized rule set or a distributed consensus protocol, there are specific barriers that a centralized model represents. So in the Bitcoin white paper, it talks about how one of the problems or the classic example that the white paper uses for the centralized model is the mint. So you can solve all of the functions and purpose that Bitcoin currently solves without using Bitcoin, right? You can just use a mint to do it. But the mint itself, being a centralized form of governance, it carries with it all of these inherent flaws, or these inherent attack vectors. One of them is that now you have only a single source of truth, right? So if the mint somehow becomes corrupted, or if people within the mint become corrupted, and we're only using the mint as the source of truth, well, this would be like, if we just all trusted only information that the government agreed was true, right? And that's a terrible solution. So we need a solution that doesn't just have a single source of truth. So we have this distributed model. But one of the and I think that this is a leap forward for humankind. Okay. And it's not to be mistaken.
This exercise with these coins or something else.
Just the advancement of distributed consensus, the advancement of decentralization as a governance model for humanity. This is sort of goes back a little bit to sort of some of the ideas that Ron Paul was talking about back when he was running for office, where he's not saying that, that we shouldn't have education. He's just saying instead of having one monolithic institution that is determining what education looks like and what it should represent, let's have these distributed models that are more localized, that are more, and we already have that, as that's how the country itself is founded, right? We have the authority of the states, and that's the authority of the states combined that comes together, that gives any relevance or utility or function to the concept of a federal government, right? But we sort of forget this sometimes, and we become so reliant on this monolithic centralized model for governance that we just assume that, well, the states are like, the government, the federal government is like the octopus head, right? And that the states are like the little tentacles that are all coming off. When in actuality it's the opposite. It is the combination of all of the wills of the states, of the governed, that forms the not the intangible, which is the federal government. Is like, it's supposed to act on all of our behalf. Well, there's no such thing as all of our behalf, right? So it just needs to do the best that it can, even though it itself has limitations. And when we apply that to things like, the reallocation of assets under a distributed and decentralized protocol, that mean, in what you just described is going back to this concept of relying on courts and stuff like that, right? And so many have like a ideological opposition to that, because they're thinking, well, we're leaving centralization behind. Centralization is yesterday's news. We're in this new decentralized, or this new decentralized paradigm, and so we have no use for centralization. Where I think that the more reasonable and rational take about this is not that we just dissolve the concept of centralization altogether, because centralization still has key functions, right? Like Apple computers, Apple doesn't work by just like, saying like, hey guys, it'd be really cool if we all just built some iPhones together. Like, like they need to have centralized systems of like, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of that, right? We need management structures. And so there are times when monolithic orders and top-down orders are valuable. And I think that to conceive that basically, that this decentralized protocol would be completely divorced from the concept of courts and law and property rights and all this stuff. To me, what that sounds like is it's a return to vigilante justice. It's a return to the concept of the wild, wild west that just says, you know what, like, this is my law on my little part of land. And, that just is, it's not an advance forward, right? So we may have these new tools that enable us to do something that we've never been able to do before, which is to specialize the work of digital tools. So now we can have, a set of systems that is focused just on data integrity, a set of systems that's focused just on authentication. And these are considered, now we describe this as modular or microservice ecosystems for, whether it's architecture, software, infrastructure, or whatever. We have, so we're touching on this concept of decentralization, right? But we aren't completely like pie in the sky, divorcing ourselves from reality. That yes, we still live in a world where some formal decrees actually matter, and if you are being given a formal decree that says that basically, like, that you are guilty of this crime, or that these assets,
Well, just
these
that you
assets
need to
use,
move these assets over
yes,
to another wallet because the keys got
exactly,
lost. That's
yeah,
that would
so
be the use of that, I would see, because once the court would say, "Hey, order, move these to the miners," then they would have to follow it.
exactly,
Now,
exactly. The only thing that it infringes on is like the purity of people saying, well, I shouldn't be told what to do, and just
you
because
don't have to, no. But then
yeah,
again, you
you
have to
don't
face the
have to,
potential ramifications of the law, of
right?
going against the law. That's
But
really,
like,
yeah, you're right. Like, you don't have to follow the law.
Yeah, like there's a
It's
sign
not,
out in front of my
but there are
street.
consequences. That's all.
Yeah, there's a sign out in on my street that says "Don't park here on Wednesday nights. That's when
Yeah,
we snowplow." I can
yeah,
ignore that sign. I can
yeah,
park my
sure.
car on there, and
Yeah,
it'll get towed.
there
Like
will be consequences. Exactly.
exactly.
So it sounds
So,
like in theory, just I want to close on this topic of these coins, but it sounds like the way what happened was that this guy he got access to the keys. This person somehow, let's just say he found the keys, he got the keys, he had the keys. He had to have some keys. Maybe they weren't the master keys, but he had something to then move them. And then he put a notice on the blockchain to potentially saying, look, I found these keys somewhere or I got them somehow. If I got these by mistake and these were belong to somebody, please claim them by doing this process, by just moving these. And then I'll back off.
sure,
Otherwise, if you don't, they're mine.
sure.
That
Yeah,
in a legal sense makes sense to me because that giving is a 90-day period to the other person of giving them notice, hey, you've abandoned this property on the side of the freeway. It's dangerous. It's out here committing it needs to be moved, like you said with the car. Now, digital property, this would be a first. This would
yeah.
be a very first.
So you could even make the argument, or you could ask the question of what if he's had the keys the whole time? Whoever has these assets, maybe they've never lost the keys. Maybe the whole point is to get a precedent in law that shows that the ownership is not derived from the possession of the key. Because of course I can, take your car keys and that doesn't mean that I possess or that I own your car. I may possess your car, but I don't own your car.
You still have to go through that. Well, here's the thing. There's different things. There's called constructive possession. There's actual possession. Neither of those are pure ownership. You
Yeah,
may have constructive possession, like where that would be where that person owns those keys. They own that Bitcoin, but they actually don't have the possession of it at this time. They have constructive possession. Then there's
right.
actual possession, and that's the guy who actually has the Bitcoin. He may not actually own it. Then there's like a pure title, which I'm not sure how you'd even define it in this sense, where you have possession and ownership all in one, possession and full ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how the law has always worked. That's how property has always been
Quiet
regarded
title,
and
basically,
defined.
is what they would have.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to highlight here, and again, I'm way outside of my depth on some of this stuff, but, I enjoy it and I like hypotheticals and thinking about it. The other thing that we could be, that I think is important for us to discuss on this topic is the fact that this is the law firm that is supposedly connected to these claims, right? This isn't like a law firm that's based on Main Street down in Idaho or something like that, right? This is Solomon Brothers,
Yeah.
which is a reputable institutional banking, titan essentially, that goes back to the early 1900s, and has been, resuscitated back in 2022, I believe.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So they're legit.
they are legit from what I could see. That this is the authentic Solomon Brothers. But also what was interesting about this is that, or the most relevant part, the fact that they're a reputable banking institution and stuff that they probably have precedent with regards to reclaiming property and things like that have had
Oh,
to
for
do with
sure.
asset management for their clients, et cetera. So they probably know the ins and outs of that from a physical property standpoint. But what the most interesting part to me is that this is institution that's located in the heart of New York City, and you don't have any more. If something applies and is given precedent, and when it comes to financial matters in the city of New York, this is New York is the gold standard when it comes to regulations around financial instruments all over the world. So it'd be one thing to get it recognized on Main Street down in Idaho and a court system to give you this sort of decree out of that
Like,
jurisdiction. But when you're operating out of New York City, it carries a much more degree of legitimacy, because it's like second I would say is Singapore, and then third probably is Germany, and but New York is head and shoulders the top in the
I
world.
would agree, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it precedent because at this point, it's like an administrative process. They're giving legal notice to someone, and then if nobody comes forward and moves those keys or produces evidence of ownership, then they're going to claim them. They're going to take title to them permanently. I guess that's what that's the ramification. So, is
Oh, so for
that
those
right?
are not keeping all the way up on this stuff too, there is a date coming up October 5th. So maybe
October
Gab,
5th.
we could have a circle back on
Oh, for
October 5th
sure. Oh,
or
I'll be
something like
watching it.
that.
I'm really interested to see what happens.
And yes, but the thing is that we don't know what we don't know. So maybe October 5th comes and a certain series of dominoes falls. Maybe October 5th comes and it is a lot of hullabaloo about nothing. We're not totally sure just now,
Oh,
but we are just trying to read between the lines a little bit.
well. What about the coins that moved? They moved all the BCH, and that was 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, right? 80,000, and then they moved
80,000,
all the
yeah.
BTC. Did they forget or not know about the other Bitcoin called BSV? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my feeling is that the reason why they never moved the BSV is the reason why they've never moved any of the Bitcoin to begin with. That BSV is the only network and the only protocol that remains true to the original design and vision of Satoshi. For those that haven't gotten, the first thing you need to do is read the Bitcoin white paper. Just take some time and do that. It's really valuable. Now we have AI tools, so if you don't understand components of that, ask an AI tool or an agent to break that down into more human legible terms or more, but really familiarize yourself with those concepts. And then you can do the same thing. I believe there's like the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. I think Derek McGill was involved with keeping a deep catalog of Satoshi's writings. And you can go in there and you can see what Satoshi actually thought about this stuff, about how to scale Bitcoin, about what its purpose was. Now, for if you're listening to this channel, I'm guessing that you already know that the Bitcoin was never intended to be digital gold. This is intended to be an electronic cash. You can look up on YouTube the Milton Friedman conversations way back in the day where he's talking about the one thing that the world is missing is digital cash, electronic cash that will, when that's here, it's going to completely revolutionize the world. And again, this revolutionizes the world by creating more independence in the world, by creating more ability to vote with your capital, to vote with your dollars. You don't necessarily have to kowtow just to the monolithic structures that be and the truthiness or whatever that has been determined is the latest trending topic that we all need to say is true, or else we get kicked offline, etc. The more that we can localize our money, our ability to exchange information reliably with each other, our ability to exchange value with each other, the more distributed and the more interconnected we become, and the better off we all are, because we create a more resilient human culture that way, by allowing new ideas to emerge. Like, for example, not to pick on the vaccine and the pandemic stuff, but when you're not allowed to think outside of the lines on some of this stuff, then you end up homogenizing the thought processes. You end up homogenizing the cultures, the people. What we need is a vibrancy, just like wildflowers growing all over the field. You don't have someone coming along and saying only tulips and tulips alone are going to be the only flowers we get, but it's this soil supports this ecosystem, and a different soil supports a different ecosystem. And we're experimenting with this for the first time on a global scale in terms of our economic capabilities, our ability to govern ourselves. And so this is, in a way, our first effort on a humanitarian and a global scale to really, be self-sovereign.
Yeah, so Satoshi's Bitcoin, it's like Americanism, the entire independent liberty vision is in action. I mean, but that's what makes it powerful, is because once you start understanding it, is that it's we don't have to rely on those other people, and we get to transact digitally, and then we can monetize our information on online or data if we choose to, and even it all the way down to just a click or one piece of data,
Yeah,
for a
and
fraction of it.
yeah, and if there's some Canadian truckers that disagree on a particular topic about this thing that the establishment believes or feels, and they want to get certain payment systems shut down, well, guess what? There's a host of other people out there in the world that do need goods moved and are willing to pay them. And we can do that peer to peer. We can do that locally. We can do that with private contracts and agreements, and the problem is that we need a way to and this is the value that Bitcoin, it's the marriage between bit and coin. Bit is the data side and coin is the value side. It's the value of data exchange on a single network. So if we create a contract with a group of Canadian truckers and we have our own goods that we need moved to port, etc., then what happens when that agreement goes south? What happens when one guy says that we agreed this and another guy says that we agreed that? That's where the immutable record of information is so important, because
Yeah.
it removes the ability for vested interests at the top to force people to play their game, like pay to play, they say, because now we have a single immutable record of the truth. If we agreed to $80 a mile, then that's immutable. We can take that to courts, right? So it's not about using this model and this system to divorce ourselves from law. It's about using this model and this system to hold ourselves more accountable to the things that we can do and the things that we can achieve. And when we can do that united together, like you said, with that American spirit, then we can fix the world's problems in under a decade.
Definitely, and that's what Americanism is all about. America first, and I want to just do a quick plug to Zemin Gao, the brilliant author and attorney, and also patent attorney, and also engineer. I mean, that guy, he wrote a book called Bit and Coin.
Yeah.
It's an academic scholarly read. I'm probably about maybe I'm slowly reading it. It's not a fast read. It's one of those things you kind of read and you let it sink in, and it's not a fiction. So anyone who's really scholarly and they want to really take it to the next level, I recommend that Bit and Coin by Zemin Gao, and he really starts to break things down on a level that's never been on paper before that I've ever seen. So yeah, and it's highly recommended.
Yeah, just absolutely brilliant guys. I mean, Gal, and there's so many brilliant people that contribute to this effort, because at the end of the day, this is we're only going to see the beginning of this. I think of it as like a new renaissance for humankind. And we're only seeing, like if you think back to Galileo and the determination that actually the earth revolves around the sun, etc. Like imagine the culture and the atmosphere in the 1200s or the 1280s in Italy or something like that, right? You're seeing the beginnings of the age that's going to come, and it's going to reshape the potentials of humanity. It's going to completely change everything. And that's what I think people like Zemin Gao, people like yourself, John Pitts is another one, who's offering brilliant insight into what this new age is going to look like. And yeah, I think that we are just on the very, very precipice, but we're not necessarily doing this all for ourselves. I believe that this is a legacy that we're going to give to our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren, because, you don't build Rome in a day. So we're putting the infrastructure in place to make a more individualistic and a more authentic world. But it is going to take time, as, there are a lot of old systems that need to be transformed by
Yeah.
the market efficiencies of doing it a better way. We don't need to tell them that they're wrong or that they're evil. We don't need to tell Google that it's evil. That's not why they're going to change their actions. They're going to change their actions because they make more money by being a better servant of humanity than by being an obstacle. And I think that that's the insight that Satoshi had, is that that we change patterns of behavior by aligning incentives, and I think Bitcoin does that in the most brilliant way possible.
Absolutely. That's the thing is it doesn't eliminate the old system. It makes the old system better. And it puts the old system on a super highway, and makes it all faster, more efficient, more transparent for everyone. That's really the power. Now, in addition, it seems like right before those coins had moved, was it the day before or the day before that, that the Teranode announcement came out? I saw it with Siggy. What can you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, the Teranode documentation is live, and so Teranode is the scalable vision for Bitcoin as originally designed and envisioned by Satoshi himself. This uses what I was describing before with the microservices and the modular architecture. So what you have there is, if anyone's ever sort of retooled an automobile or put installed a turbo onto an old car or something like that, you realize that you can take parts out, and you don't just have to use the stock version, right? You can swap it out, you can supercharge, you can and so this is effectively what's being done with the Node software. So the Node software is the software that is being used to validate transactions, and it was all described by Satoshi in the white paper. But just like anything, when we, like when even with America, we talked a lot about America. You may have the idea, the Federalist Papers or something like that that sketches out some of the ideas of how this is going to work all into a unified system, your rarely is your first draft going to be the pinnacle, right? You need to work on it. And so what's ironic is that, with the Bitcoin white paper, we do really have, a first draft. I mean, the Bitcoin white paper is still to this day, it's almost going on 20 years old now, and nothing else holds a candle to it. There's 10,000 copycats in the world, and nothing is nearly as well thought through or as deeply kind of essential to creating this distributed and this decentralized model as this white paper and the
Nothing, yeah.
protocol that's spelled out in it. But there's a difference between putting out the ideas, so you can lay out the ideas for freedom or something like that in the Declaration of Independence. You may be able to lay out the concept of it, and the concept doesn't have to change. We can always say, okay, we're always working towards life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Right.
We don't
But
take an eraser out and go life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and really great
yeah.
hot dogs or something like
But it
that, right?
wasn't until the Constitution came around, like a few years later, that really like now we can start applying these
Exactly. How do we implement
principles.
it, right? So
Yeah.
the original Node software, and that's to this day, it is known as the SV Node software. That is the original implementation or the original effort to implement the ideas that were put forth in that Bitcoin white paper. And so really what you have is, this is really the second version of the software that's going to allow Bitcoin to scale. And so what's great about this is that it was designed from the very beginning, from the bottom up. It was designed to be a fully scalable, modular microservices architecture. It can handle 1 million transactions per second with ease at using proof of work on a distributed system. And this is all done in coordination with organizations like the IEEE, which were fundamental to the formation of things like TCP/IP and the foundation layer of the internet itself. And now what you see is that this is for the first time ever, the documentation and importantly the open source documentation for actually standing up a Teranode implementation and being able to do distributed consensus at scale.
Yeah, it's a really big deal, man. So, all right, what, yeah, super exciting and timing of it as well. I mean, it really seems like it was extremely well timed now and well planned, along with the other events. So, tell me about what, your business is applying some of the things in Bitcoin actually with the use case. Tell me about what's going on with the TCG. And I know hand cash is still going great, you said. So everything's going great with hand cash. I know there were people were having some challenges with the Centbee or other places, but you assured me earlier on the call, but everybody else is that, like, look, if you if you have your seed phrases, um, it's not the end of the world, right? Isn't that what you said? Like,
Yeah,
I know people. So can you explain, just maybe just briefly explain that to people? Because I know people who maybe might panic, and
sure.
what your thoughts are.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think that was in relation to the comments that came out last week that I think the former team from the Relija wallet were looking to move on from focusing on blockchain based solutions. And so, there were some questions that were coming out about, okay, well, if I had been using Relija wallet in the past, how would I be able to ensure that I have access to my funds going forward? And so, yeah, that was one of the abilities, where we're talking about having access to your seed phrase, which your seed phrase is deterministically, compiled or formed from the private key. And so it uses a string of some 2,000 words, maybe 2,048 words. I can't recall, or maybe it's 4,096 words. I can't recall exactly, but there's a list of these words, etc. And you can, so just like SHA-256 itself or some of these other hashing algorithms, they're forward compatible, but not backwards compatible. So you can take any information, you can put it through this cryptographic algorithm, and it will deterministically produce, a result. But you can't take the result and work backwards and find the source that created that result. So it works the exact same way. So you can take a private key, and if that private key was ever exposed, then you would be, you would people would be able to access your funds. But you can, and these private keys oftentimes have like numbers, they have capital letters, they have lowercase letters, etc. It can be complex and confusing for people to be able to track and manage. Whereas, a simple 12-word phrase, some people can memorize it in their heads. Other people, come up with a creative way. They can, I've seen people that etch it into a plate, a metal plate, and then bury it in the ground or something like this.
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily
So
recommend that because you could find people going around with metal detectors,
So let's
but
say that the person, the wallet, the wallet went out of business. Then a person, would they go over to another wallet, enter in the seed phrase over there, and then import the funds? Is that what they would do?
yes, precisely. Yeah.
Okay,
So
got it.
any wallet, so Rock Wallet's an example. Rock Wallet allows you, they're an open source fork of the Bread wallet, BRED. Very popular wallet, and they're available on the Android store, etc. But yeah, they allow you to input your seed phrase. So if you had an old Relija wallet, if you were using Relija as your main user interface for being able to access and manage your funds, just like you have one bank account, but some people use a desktop machine to access their bank account. Other people use a mobile machine or a mobile app to access their bank account. But both are just simply interfaces
Yeah.
that allow you to move and interact with the same set of funds. Well, it works the exact same way. So just because one, tool that allows you to interact with those funds is closing down or it's no longer going to be maintained or updated, you can still access those funds. And people ask me these questions all the time. So if you're watching the show, you have a question about this, you can send me an email, brett.banfe@bsvblockchain.org, and I'll
Yeah.
help you get
Yeah,
that
and
sorted
thank you,
out.
Brett. I've been helping to direct people to that. A lot of times, people ask a lot of questions, and with my channel, and I appreciate, I've been helping to try to direct them to your Discord area, where other people can help, get involved and answer these questions, or like you said on this email.
Many hands make light work.
Definitely, thank you. So let me. What's going on with Champions TCG?
Yeah, so Champions has just recently announced a new CEO taking over. So this is Jake Stout. He's well known within the TCG community called Tyrant. His name is Tyrant King. and he's looking, where he earned his stripes. He's been a game designer for many different games in the past. Cards and Castles 2 is one of the ones that he worked on. But he's played every game under the sun for the past, 20, 30 years, etc. And just like myself, I go back probably 30 years or so, some of these games. So he has deep experience in that, real community oriented guy. And yeah, we're looking to do some really exciting, fun things, partnerships that we're not able to announce just yet, but that are coming down the road, and things that, are really demonstrating the value of all of this, all of the key value propositions that we were just describing about, a localized community that is, able to trade and barter with each other. So in this case, you're trading and bartering digital trading cards, and being able to link them with different utility, being able to potentially, access new content based on that, being able to access new achievements, rewards, unlock bonuses, etc. All of that stuff, I think, we're really demonstrating this, but it is still really new. So, we're having conversations with large gaming companies and talking to them about all of this being basically, if you've seen the movie Ready Player One, we're looking at this in real time, really deployed. It's not just a theory or something like this, but this is possible today. And one of the reasons why it's possible, just piggyback off what we were talking about with Teranode, is that, a lot of times when you're talking with gaming companies about blockchain integrations, they have this idea that blockchains require gas. And, what you see with a truly scalable implementation of a UTXO proof of work set like BSV blockchain, the still to this day original implementation of Bitcoin, is that you see that you don't have to have any gas, just like like Vitalik Buterin said, the internet of money shouldn't cost 5 cents to send things. That's 5 cents would be ridiculous. So yeah, we're just returning to the original vision of electronic cash, but instead of just like we said before, it's bit and coin. So it's not just the value in terms of maybe it's a rare card, maybe it's worth $25 or something on the open market, but not only can you find a buyer for that market, thereby storing and ensuring collectability to digital content, something that doesn't exist today, like it does in the physical trading card world, but you're also able to tie the bit side of that, which is information, whether that's information about the total supply of that asset. So if you have a rare coin, maybe you have the ability to see that it's one of only 13,
Hmm. Is
or that you see that
is
it's
that
one of
how
13, but 6 have been destroyed.
so is that how Champions leverages the blockchain, is by somehow by uh proving that something is what it is, or that it is actually rare, or how does it?
Exactly. Exactly. And, so it solves a use case, a real world problem, which is
Yeah,
the
maybe you can
inability
explain that
to.
to me. What is it? What is the use case for Champions on the blockchain?
Yeah. So, first of all, they're able to be used in the game. So you're able to build from your collection, you can build a deck, and then you can compete in tournaments. You compete for prizes. You can compete for rewards. You can compete for hourly payouts with all the other players that are
And
doing the same.
but why do you need the blockchain for that?
So the blockchain would be to ensure that, let's just say that you have a really powerful card or something like that, I wouldn't be able to just say I have a powerful card, right? It actually needs to be verified that it does belong to me, that it's one of only 10 that were ever issued, etc. Because if you lose to someone and you lose to a really powerful card, you want to be sure that was an authentic card. We see problems like this with Pokemon, that just only 2 years ago, or maybe even last year, at the World Pokemon Championships, you have like the biggest stage where they're showcasing the global standard for their product. And one of their people that were competing and was getting all the way into the finals was using counterfeit cards. So imagine how you would feel if you were a player
Counterfeit.
that maybe had trained for a whole year. I mean, it's the equivalent of an athlete who is competing, and you're competing against someone that's using like a banned substance or something like that.
So it's a big problem that it sounds like, is these counterfeit cards.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, and
see.
it's not just a problem in that industry. I mean, it's a problem throughout the world. I mean, how are
Yeah.
you ensuring the reliability and the authenticity of the
Well, the only
information?
way is through a centralized party. That's how, you got to rely on somebody else to say, well, this guy has rep as a reputable entity, so he says it's good. That's really the only other way that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's specific issues with using a centralized party because if the centralized party gets co-opted, then maybe I let all my friends get away with using this specific this specific card and I don't let anyone else. So
Well,
the we what we
there's a guy called Jack Dorsey. He's really good at helping out with those types of things. He's behind Square or Change.org. Have you ever heard about him?
yes,
Oh, and
yes, yes.
also, yeah, Lightning
It's like a
Network. He's got
permission
this
slip
great
when
thing
you're,
going on.
you get the hall pass to walk through
Yeah.
down the social media lanes. As long as you stay in your lane, you get your hall pass restored.
Yeah, just don't talk about anything he doesn't like, and you're okay. Anything he doesn't like, you're shut down or banned. He doesn't. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
And for those that are, tuning in and enjoy this content, I'd encourage you to go out and check out some of the Daniel Krawitz content. He has this one really great he has an episode that's called, I think it's called the Bitcoin Files or Bitcoin Theories. But he talks about how, you have the idea of a monolithic entity that is informing all of the public of the truth, but the only way that you can see this entity that's informing us of our reality is if we all look in the exact same direction, right? And so anyone that decides to just turn away and look in a different direction, you lose your reality. And so he talks about how and he describes how that is sort of similar to
is
the
that on
antagonist.
YouTube?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. And
Why don't
yeah.
yeah, why don't we plug it and end with that, and we'll put it
All
at
right.
the end, and everybody can watch it. If you find the actual video, we'll put it at the end. I'll make it a little card here at the end if everybody can watch it.
Yeah,
Let's
and
do
if
that.
you're watching this content and you find the video that we're talking about, leave us a comment in underneath Gavin's channel, underneath this video. Let us know what you thought about that Krawitz channel, and let us know and his specifically about the sovereign that everyone has to stare in the same direction. And if you drop your hand cash handle, I'll send you a pack of Champions cards as a thank you just for sticking around to the end.
Oh, nice. That's great. Yeah, thank you. Everyone, leave a comment for that, and we'll definitely take a look at it. And like I said, Brett will send you a gift on top of that as well. So, all right, Brett. Well, thank you. Let's do it again sometime. Definitely before the October 5th deadline on the Satoshi era coins potential, final deadline. I mean, I think we'll hear it a lot more before then, but we got to at least circle around before then. Okay.
Well, Gavin, I just want to say, thank you so much. You do such great work in this community, and I think that you're an example of living your best life. Someone that is really not just talking the talk, but really walking the walk when it comes to these things. And so it's truly such an honor and a privilege. The information that's on your YouTube channel, it's information not just for BSV, not just for Bitcoin, but it's information for life. And really honored to call you a friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett. That means the world. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. Definitely hit the likes, hit the ones, and leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you at the top.